Hello, once again, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Morning Catch Up. And I'm not here alone. As I said, my name is Tusi. I am here with Thozama Busakwe. And Thozama, as you know, is just not just prolific, but also just a progressive, absolutely prolific, and also groundbreaking artist director. But they're going to explain themselves to you. Hello, Thozama, and welcome to the Morning Catch Up.
Hey, Cornele, how are you doing? Thank you for having
I'm
me.
absolutely excited. I'm excited. When I heard that I had to interview you, I had goosebumps. I had absolute goosebumps because I thought, what would you ask Thozama Busakwe? I mean,
I think the question is, what would you not ask me?
exactly. I'm so happy that you were able to take our call. And also, thank you so much for coming to this interview. We really just want to get to know more about Thozama. Who is Thozama? What are they up to? What are their plans? And just to also get to know more about the pushing boundaries for young minds. So let's start from the beginning. Thozama, please tell us more about you. Who are you and what is it that you do for our listeners?
First and foremost, I am a conduit, and I am a child of the Most High. I'm a child of my ancestors. I'm an extension of the people that came here before me, and I do not take that lightly. And I think it is because of them that I'm able to do the kind of work that I do and channel the kind of stories that I kind of channel. And that brings me to what I do. I am a director, I'm a writer, and I write for a living, basically. And most of my stories are really about elevating Blackness, and not just Black bodies, but the queer Black body, because we have kind of been riding the back of the train for far too long. And so I believe that part of my mandate really is to excavate stories that speak back to that, but in a way that is less sexualized, if you were. So I am that. That is basically who I am in the theater space, in the film space. That's basically my mandate.
I love when you say that how you kind of, really tapping into Black narratives and just going into that even more. How do you then relate that to a normal 17-year-old? How does that kind of, how can we more define it or even simplify it in terms of what they see and what they feel? What is the kind of more thematic concerns that can resonate to that 17-year-old?
I think for me, more than anything, is that what we have failed to do with 17-year-olds is that we have failed to give them their royal and spiritual odes. And therefore, more than anything, is identity and belonging. More than anything, those ideas, I think, come in very strongly, because when you're 17, you are kind of like at a stage where you are formulating certain ideologies and perspectives about the world that you live in. But because as children, we don't get to hear about our real odes, we don't get to hear about our spiritual odes, and therefore we don't recognize our purpose. And I guess what that looks like is really affirming kids even before they get to 17, Kwanel. It's affirming them before they get to 17, letting them know that they belong, and looking at them as human beings that are worthy of having, I guess, conversations that matter to them. I think more than anything, we fail to hear kids. And I think from where I come from, it's like, how do we get to listen more than we speak back to? And I think that's what resonates more than anything, is the idea that we we are going to listen more to you as a 17-year-old, you know, and through the work that we're doing, it's more of a listening than a talking back to. And I think that's the most wonderful thing that kind of like resonates, because through listening to what the teens and the children are wanting to talk about, then you are able to tap into those fears and allow them to then kind of like formulate their own ideologies about what that means for them.
Amazing stuff. And this is so prolific and so prominent as we are celebrating Heritage Month. I think maybe my next question would be, is heritage the same for everyone? Is it the same for a young boy living in Alexandra, to a young boy living in Richards Bay, to a young girl living in, I don't know, Mitchell's Bay, Mitchell's Plain, or wherever? Is heritage the same for all of us? And if not, then how do we then connect to our heritage and to our ancestral or even spiritual background?
Yeah, that is a really tough question, I think, for me particularly to answer. But there is no one heritage. I think it's all different, and I think in the nature of South Africa and how South Africa is kind of like structured, we always see it in terms of like just like the cultural differences, the different tribes. But I think it goes a little bit deeper than that. It starts in the home. There's a heritage that is really embedded within the homes that we come from, and so it is going to be different from a child who lives in Alexandra versus a child who lives in Mitchell's Plain, based on how they are brought up. They're kind of like different rituals, they have different values that we are brought up with in the different spaces that we kind of like grow up in. And I think what will help us in terms of connecting, I think more than anything is dialogue, and ensuring that no one is left out within that dialogue, because I think we've become so great at speaking up for one another, but we're not very good at giving each other space to say, actually, I want to speak up for myself. And so I think getting rid of those boundaries that say, I'm going to speak up for you, rather, I think the way to connect would be, tell me who you are, tell me what your heritage is. And that child from Alexandra telling the child from Mitchell's Plain who they are will get the child from Mitchell's Plain to understand them a little bit better. And the child from Mitchell's Plain explaining to the child from Alexandra who they are will get them to understand each other better. They don't have to always kind of like have this fake positivity thing that's going on, but there will be a mutual kind of like respect and an understanding based on those conversations that happen between them. So I think when we talk about heritage, I think we really need to start also looking at the cross-pollination of these values, the cross-pollination of these rituals, because I think we are people who are brought up in really traditional homes, and tradition not in the sense of culture, but just tradition in the sense of the various ways in which. Yes, exactly. The norms and the values, as you put it. So I think it's most important that we all kind of like share those norms and those values with one another, and how they then shape our humanity. And I guess that becomes important. I think that becomes even more important when the worlds are amalgamating. We're living in a world of social media where you're now connecting not only with a child from Alex, but a child from Alex with a child from Toronto. How do they negotiate their identity with someone who comes from a more affluent country or a more developed country? I think it really starts by them knowing and understanding that who they are is okay, and that they can always speak up about who they are, and there won't be any contention to that.
Which then goes back to speak to the point that you began with, to talk about the importance of identity and the importance of
Mhm.
identifying with whatever norms and values that resonate and that speak to you. And I love how you mentioned about listening. You really touched on, such an important value of listening. And when I hear it in terms of not just listening to other people, but also listening to each other. I feel like we
Mhm.
talk to people about heritage and culture and young children about what is heritage and culture and identity. But in essence, it's them that really need to talk to us or even talk with each other about what that
Mhm.
means and what that identity or that word means for them,
Mhm.
regardless of all of these kind of norms and values and categories that have always been, kind of typecasted and also been taught to us. But I really want to touch back into more of you, but I want to go back to this idea of heritage and also us as celebrating the 30 years of democracy. So, Sama, please tell us more about the Pushing Boundaries for Young Minds project, and also congratulations on winning this. Is it a residency? Is it a scholarship? Please let us know about that.
Thank you so much for the congratulatory message. I am very grateful and extremely grateful for it. It is a playwriting award that I got from ASSITEJ South Africa through a collaboration from ASSITEJ South Africa and the government of Belgium. And basically, what they were doing was they were looking for playwrights in the theater for young audiences and people who are really going to be writing stories that are pushing boundaries. I think what that meant in this context is that most of the work that we find in theater for young audiences is mostly didactic, it is prescriptive. We're literally kind of like, I think going back to the conversation that we're having, that we were kind of like prescribing to children and young people how they should be. So the kind of work that would push boundaries is maybe work that has not been seen, or maybe work that is not prescriptive, or maybe work that is not didactic. And so basically that's what they were looking for. And we had this amazing time with Fikry, who was the mentor at the time of the 10 playwrights that were chosen. And we had to write stories that then push boundaries, I guess. And within those workshops, we were really getting our hands dirty and figuring out, where do you start a story and how do you formulate a story? But how do you also formulate a story that is not concerned about necessarily teaching or preaching to the young audiences? And that was a very, very informative process, and that's where I guess my play was birthed within those 5 days. And after that, the plays went through an adjudication process. I cannot tell you how excited I was when I found out I had gotten the award, because I didn't think that I would. There were 10 great playwrights in the room. And so when you've got all these minds together, you're just happy that you're in the room, and you're not necessarily thinking that you're going to get something out of it. And the fact that they chose me, I guess, is not only testament to what the necessity of the work, but I guess my skill also as a writer.
And I think that's so important, because I think, firstly, before I even talk about can we please get casted? Can we please be in the audition? We want to be in your play. We want to be in the play. It sounds so.
Well,
I'm actually like, in my mind, I'm like, when is the auditions? When is the auditions? Because we want to be there. Do you have a process? Maybe let us know about that process in terms of your selection, your processing, now in terms of creating and making this wonderful production.
I mean, maybe let me tell you a little bit about what it is, and then the kind of like process that I'm currently going to be engaging in. So Sasikhe Sabhabha, We Once Flew, is a play that I wrote for children between the ages of 9 to 15. and it really speaks to the idea of home and what happens when our homes kind of like experience a destabilization of some sort. Who do we become when our homes experience those destabilizations? And I think for the most part, these stories have been told from the perspective of adults. But I also wanted, and I was wondering, what happens when children experience loss? How do children experience grief, particularly in a particular context? And so you've got all of these different characters that are going through the world really in their everyday lives, but they're experiencing different kinds of traumas, and they're all just seeking to transcend. They're all seeking to craft wings that will take them out of their context. But I think what is more amazing is the fact that some of them do find healing in their backyards. Some of them find healing in the kitchens of their grandmothers, in the arms of their grandmothers. And so I think there's a cross-pollination here that is very much needed between the older generation and the younger generation. Because when you think of theater for young audiences, we're just thinking about young people, but what about the adults in their lives, and how those relationships work or even do not work out. So and that's what it is in a nutshell. And Thozama is a queer child, so I had to put it in there because I think the matter of identity is just so important. And also queer subjects are we shy away from them when we're talking about children and young people, particularly in Black cultures. It's seen as taboo. What are you teaching children? You're sexualizing children. You're teaching children things that they're not supposed to know. But the children, when they're formulating ideas about themselves, they're curious about themselves and their identities, and it's not something that is not there. We're not picking this from the tree. It's already happening. And I would rather we've got safe children and children who have been written about and can see themselves in stories or reflected in storybooks and plays than to have a child kill themselves because they feel like they're alone in the world. So there's really all of that.
Wow.
And the process that I'm now going to be engaging in is really kind of like strengthening the work with Fikry and really going deeper into the subject matters of the story, strengthening the characters. It's so hard to write for theatre for young audiences because I think sometimes you don't get the ages right, or sometimes you think you've got a certain age and then the dialogue as you continue you find that, oh, okay, maybe I think this child is now sounding 12, thought they were 9, and it's so hard. So it's hard to really strike that kind of balance. And I think that's where the work currently is, wanting to tighten up those loose ends and really looking at it to make sure that it reflects truthfully certain demographics, but that it drives home the point without preaching anything to anyone.
Wow. Amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, we are speaking to Thozama Busakwe, and we've just been listening to just this beautiful narrative of, can you please say the title again?
It's Sasikhe Sabhabha, We Once Flew.
We Once Flew. And that's amazing. I mean, for me, it resonates so deeply with most of our childhood experiences. I remember when I was also very young, and I think maybe someone can also relate to this, is that I always had a red blanket. And so whenever, I had, occurrences and situations where my dad was very violent, I always had this red blanket, and I always used to cover myself with this red blanket. It became a safe space. It became a home for me. And until this day, I still have a red blanket that keeps me warm, that keeps me safe, that reminds me of safety. It reminds me that I'm okay. It's okay. And I think one of those kind of stories for me is a replica also of just the work that you are doing. I think your narrative and your frame of thinking is absolutely amazing, and I think it resonates to each and every single one of us, not just the young audiences, but also with us. Growing up, we always are asking about what is home and where is home. Thozama, the last thing I really want to talk about is also maybe going deeper into celebrating the 30 years of democracy, and also now that it's Heritage Month. How then does your work resonate within this, this idea of democracy? Maybe it might be a very long answer, but I think maybe in a nutshell, do you think your work is still kind of like pushing towards democracy? Are you still feeling safe? Like, what kind of feelings come about when you think of the work that you are doing and the contribution that it has on society?
Who I think for me, most definitely, I think this work or my work really, and even me just as an artist and as an individual, I think there is a lot of progress that I am seeing, a lot of inclusion that I'm seeing. I think yes, we can say that on the ground there's a lot that needs to be done, but I think that is just a human primal need for violence, and there's sometimes nothing that we can do about that other than continue to tell stories that humanize people. But I think for me, definitely, I think I'm seeing a lot of progress in terms of how I'm included in spaces, and how 30 years later we're able to tell queer stories without being questioned. We have more representation now in the media than we've ever had, and people like us are starting to get seen. And I think it just speaks to how far we have come as a country and as a people. Those things are worth us looking at and applauding, because representation matters more than anything. I think you want to include people as you progress, and so seeing that we are being included is really amazing. And I need to stress the fact that seeing the kind of work that I do, that is very much queer based, now being a part of things like pushing boundaries is also just a testament of where we are at in terms of our democracy, and that is amazing.
It's absolutely amazing. Touching base also, I think with ASSITEJ South Africa, they just recently came from Cuba, and they did a Cuba conference, and it was such a success and such an amazing turnout. And one of the things that the board member and also the chairperson spoke about, Lalo Mokmokuku, was the future of the Black child. And I think for me, when you say Black child, it's very inclusive. It's inclusive of the queer Black child. It's very inclusive. So I love the work that you are doing, and I think it's stretching our minds even more. It's expanding what we used to know, and it's also just igniting a new flame, especially in our modern day South Africa. So thank you so much for the work that you are doing.
No, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kwanele. And I think when you're talking about igniting flames, I think that's the only thing that we can do until there is some kind of a change. And I think there's a generational mandate, for us to pass on the baton and ensure that we're safeguarding humanity as a whole. And I think through the work that ASSITEJ is doing all over the world, really, I think that gets us one step closer to be able to do that. And I think what excites me the most is the fact that the play is going to be read for the first time in Johannesburg on the 25th of October at the Teksmark Festival in UJ. So if anyone has the capacity and the capability to do that, please avail yourself and just go there to listen to some of the words and the chords that we've struck with this particular work, and tell us what you think.
NgesiZulu, maybe I might even get it wrong, but NgesiZulu kuthiwa umlomo uyadala. So it means that whatever you speak becomes, and I think, and I say this, is that your work is going to be seen all over the world. I see many books. I see you writing books and signing off books. You're going to be our Oprah Winfrey. One day, I tell you.
Yes, here. Amen and amen. Okay. Oprah Winfrey it is.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Thozama Busakwe. Please do follow Thozama Busakwe. How do we follow you, by the way, on your social media?
I am on Instagram. It is Thozama Busakwe _ and I am on Facebook. It is Thozama Busakwe. I'm also on Twitter. It is Thozama _ Busakwe. So you can catch me on all of these social media platforms. Let's talk about writing. Let's talk about books. Let's talk about how we want to serve humanity. I think more than anything, that's what you would be following me, I guess, to like think about. I'm not doing anything on social media other than talk about the things that I care about, so be warned.
Amazing stuff. And please don't forget, on the 25th of October, mark your calendars. We're going to be there on the front row, front seat. I am there, and I'm going to be definitely supporting this amazing initiative. Thozama, really wish you an amazing Heritage Month. Thank you so much for joining us. And also thank you to the listeners at Morning Catch Up. This is Morning Catch Up with ASSITEJ South Africa, and we've been talking to Thozama Busakwe, and we're going to say goodbye. Thank you so much, and see you soon.